in a fairly diverse community. There's a lot of people, both from different parts of the United States, that move to the Northern Virginia or DC metro area for work, for education, for things. But there's also a large immigrant population. Broad Run, where I teach and you graduated, is, I think, 50% white, and not all of those students were born here. But we're on the verge of being what they would call a majority minority school. And so the level of diversity in terms of race and religion and cultural background is probably, it's much more diverse setting than if you went to school in the middle of Iowa. And so I don't know how,
Yes, it's objective to where you are.
Yeah.
But where, I had the opportunity to be here, and, I did get, and, like I said, it was kind of negative that I had the language barrier, but also positive because I spent the first couple of years more of an observant, and I think that's how I learn most.
Right.
And I pay attention to details. So I would just observe the environment around me, and then, just kind of, then after, I kind of gathered all that information and processed it.
Right.
Then I was like, okay, this is what I think about this, and this is how I'm going to go about, these things.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting that as a filmmaker, someone with a degree in film, like what you just described is almost exactly the thing that you've ended up doing is watching carefully and then figuring out how to piece together what you're seeing so that other people see it your way. Really, right? Is there maybe something you're working on now or something you've done either for yourself or in school? Do you have a film, long, short, whatever? I know you've been working on some things and you've had some success. Do you have something that you would say you're most proud of, or maybe something that maybe reflects that view? And I don't mean to say your view is and we're moving to the country, but so much where you're watching carefully and now you have the opportunity to make everyone else watch carefully too. Do you have something you've made like that you feel?
I have two projects. The most recent one is my capstone film. It's a short narrative that follows a Syrian family. Mm-hmm. And for that one is basically, and I got funding from a research program at Mason. So they required research. Okay. Which is basically I collect the information that I need, the stories that I've heard from family members, the things I've seen on the media, and I bring all of that information and I'm like, okay, what do I want people to see? It's the media mostly shows you news reports and stuff. They mostly show you numbers of the events that are happening on ground in other countries or overseas. So, I wanted to zoom in on individuals so that people get a chance to meet who are those people behind those numbers that you're seeing. What are the things that are being affected? So then I kind of use film to create that story and film it.
So this requires research. This requires a lot of careful piecing together. What's it called, by the way?
Jihad.
It's called?
Jihad.
Jihad, okay. Yeah. So I guess I have a different question. How much of the title is meant to reflect content in the film versus how much of the title is meant to attract attention to? How much of that is hook to get people interested versus how much of it is part of, say, the plot?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the plot. And, it's this word is on everyone's radar. It's oh my God, Right. And that's something that will kind of get people's attention, but I also want people to question. Right. If you watch the film, you'll go throughout the film and someone who only knows what jihad means from the Western perspective, they'd be like, wait, why is it called jihad? Right? Okay. And then now comes the answer of, well, the word has been defined, misdefined on the media. Okay. Right? It means struggle. It means striving to live. We're striving for something that's better. Right. And whenever people kind of hear the word jihad combined with Syria, they automatically think ISIS. ISIS is nowhere in the film. Right. Okay. And I kind of wanted to remind people and draw attention to the struggle that people are facing, the individuals, the civilians that are facing. Okay. Sort of your regular person The true definition of the jihad that's happening in Syria that needs attention is the struggle of those people.
Right.
Of this moment.
So I guess, and this was the other question I was going to ask then, is how much of the film is purely fiction versus how much is, a representation, how much is nonfiction versus fiction? Obviously piecing together research and actual experience, but did you actually base this on an actual family, or did you sort of invent the family and then put the rest of the pieces to it?
I had to find the ethical balance of it. So the family is fiction. Their names, the combination of them, and the events that happen to the family are true events.
Okay.
I've taken from family members who have experienced certain things. There are different things that the family goes through, and then each one of those different events I've gotten from one place, and I piece them together.
Right. So it's a little bit like a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle almost.
Yeah.
Okay. How long is the film?
It's about 10 minutes.
Okay, so short film.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So in terms of, I like how you focus on the definition of the word jihad. It's something, we probably did a little bit in our class, but that I do a lot more now, especially in AP language. It's focused on rhetoric and looking at how people are expressing things, not just what you're saying, it's really how you're saying it. And I think a lot about connotation and denotation. So, denotation is what does it say in the dictionary? And then your connotation is how do people actually use it? Like when you hear a word, it makes you feel a thing. And how the word makes you feel is probably more important than what it actually says in the dictionary. And so in defining jihad as struggle, that allows for, please correct me if at any point I say something wrong, but it allows for what I think is probably a more, I don't know if the word modern or progressive view of it. I know that there are people who look at the word in a very literal sense, in an historical context within the Qur'an, and take it to very literally be a struggle against other people. It becomes a more violent thing. And my feeling, and this is the part where I keep running about this, is that I get the sense from people I know that in a somewhat, I don't know if the word is progressive or modern, I'm not defining it well, that it really could be an internal struggle, that it could just be a struggle to be good or to live a good life. Is that a fair way to think about, am I explaining that well? I'll probably do a terrible job.
That's the thing, having the word misdefined, makes it seem like, whatever came originally in the scripture, is the kind of more harsh, violent way to think of it. But it's actually, even in Islam, there's this, jihad means certain different things. Like your struggle within yourself, your struggle to provide for your family, that's jihad. Me wearing the headscarf in a country that looks at it negatively, that's jihad.
Okay. So you can almost just substitute in the word fight, because everyone can be fighting something personally, internally, externally. But
it's for the sake of something good.
Right.
That's the key.
So when you say for the sake of something good, is it fair? Can you fairly apply that broadly? Just say it's sort of general goodness, or does it need to be a more religious or spiritual goodness? How closely does the word need to be used with religion versus all the other struggles in life? There are a lot of ways you could fight for something that's good that may or may not be directly involved in religion. Can you still use that word outside of the religious context? Or does that not make sense?
Yeah, the thing is, we believe that the religion is almost like a curriculum in your life, right?
Okay.
And it's one of the base ideas in the religion is that, for example, you have to be happy. That's something that, not have to be happy, but taking care of yourself.
Smile whether you like it or not.
No, taking care of yourself.
Okay.
Right? That's a requirement in our religion.
Okay.
Taking care of your family is a requirement in your religion.
Right.
Giving charity. Doing things that in society are considered maybe culturally good.
Mm-hmm.
They're looked at as benevolent acts. Those are requirements for our religion.
Okay. So, yeah, and I actually have this conversation occasionally with friends who are, like they're Christian, but I always feel like that's a weird way to say it because some of these people do not regularly attend church, you know, and so it's you're almost like culturally Christian as opposed to, but the idea that, you know, when you say like separate church and state or things like that, and my point is, as a person who's very interested in religion, but is not particularly religious, really like having a discussion, but I don't personally practice that. I say that, you know, I always feel like if you really believe something that strong, then everything else in your life has to be affected by it. You know, like, imagine that it's almost like if you have like a topographic sort of map, you know, like a model of like mountains and things like that. If that is like your core belief, then everything else you do in your life is like laying a blanket over it. The blanket is the blanket, but once you lay it down, it takes the shape of whatever's underneath it. And so in that way, so I guess, you know, summarize, paraphrase, correct me, but the way you're saying it makes me think that your feelings on religion, or in this case, the use of the word jihad, would be involved in everything because everything would be involved in religion or in your religious views. Is that fair? Like you can't take them apart, kind of.
Yeah.
What's been the response to the film? Like, are you getting to have these conversations? Or?
In certain classes, yes. And it was interesting to kind of, you know, all the weeks leading up to the Mason Film Festival where it was first screened, just hearing people say, oh, I'm excited to see Jihad. Oh, I really want to see Jihad, right? And just kind of using that word in a positive connotation.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. People said that they weren't angry or scared.
It was interesting because in my when I first pitched the idea of the film to the class and the professor, I mentioned the name, and no one said anything. Like, no one asked me.
Like good, bad, or otherwise, like you're just sort of.
Yeah, and then there's another student who was doing a really interesting documentary about a Muslim father who was wrongfully imprisoned, and then she's filming their reunion with her friend and the father. And she was like, yeah, I've been doing a lot of research, and like, I learned a lot of things. Like, I didn't know jihad meant holy war. And I was like, okay. And I told the class, I was like, when I said the name, the choice of the main character of the film was named Jihad. And then it changed. But the film was still called Jihad. And I was like to the class, when I said that was the title of my film, no one said anything. No one asked me.
Right.
Why? You know?
Yeah.
And they almost didn't really pay attention.
Well, do you think it's that they didn't pay attention, or that no one wanted to touch it because, like, was it out of like a general discomfort, or you know, when someone says a thing that you're like, I'm not even going to touch it, and you just pretend like that didn't happen and move on?
Maybe. Yeah. But I addressed it. I was like, this is what jihad means in Islam. You know? It's an Arabic word, and those are its ties to religion. Mm-hmm. And this is what I'm doing with it in the film. And the girl was like, okay, good. So you told me that because she would have been doing the opposite of what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do, you know?
So when she says that, like, was that a genuine, like, appreciation? Was she appreciative of a better awareness of the word and the topic?
Yeah.
Or was that a little bit of like, oh crap, everything I've done is rude, like...
No, she was like, no, and she was like, yeah, I need to, like, look into it more. And we kind of, like, had a conversation about, you know, I had to tell her that, you know, the word has been misdefined in the media. And, you know, if you know how Google search works, you know, they only show you what you biased.
They're very good at showing you what you want to see.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
what
horrifying.
you're used to. Yeah.
Well, and, you know, I say that, but of course, you know, I love when I'm looking for something sort of random and specific, and I type half a word and it knows exactly what I want. Like, I love it because you just save me all this time and trouble. But then sometimes when I'm genuinely asking an open-ended question, then sometimes you only get the answer that you want. And I almost wish there was like a toggle switch on Google where I could turn that on and off. Like, show me everything versus show me just what I want. You know? I don't know how to ask this question. Given your concerns about how not just the word jihad, but maybe Islam in general is portrayed in American media, do you think that's something that we should address in school? Or do we address in school? I mean, I obviously only sit mine in class, so is that something that you feel like, did that come up in a government class or a history or culture class. Like, is this a conversation that you guys have in high school?
No.
Should you?
Yes. Because it causes, I remember this is something else I also remember from your class. I can't remember who said it, but you were telling us that not knowing causes fear, and fear causes violence.
Right.
I can't remember who said that quote. And I'm not like quoting words.
Yeah, no. I know what you're saying. I'm trying to think of like it's an idea that comes up a couple of different times in my class. So okay.
Yeah, and because people don't know,
right,
what Islam actually is or what it promotes, and they're only kind of like taking and believing everything they're seeing, it causes fear, and then that fear causes violence, and it causes people to Islamophobes to act on their fears.
Right. Do you think that that's like the reciprocal? Like, is that sort of the other side of, say, the same coin where maybe in some places in the Middle East where, say, school curriculum is more controlled, or maybe you have state media, and so people maybe don't have access to broad information. When you saw the video of the Iraq veterans and you realized that some of them had very strong feelings about why they shouldn't be fighting, or they should be, but you had concerns about how it's playing out and the rest, are those conversations that are missed in Middle Eastern schools maybe the same way that
definitely. Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Like after when the Iraq war started, it was like, I think I was like 6 or something.
Yeah.
But I remember ever since then, like we grew up with the fear of America.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were like, especially us, we're on the borders of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, they would always say, like I grew up with something called the danger alarm, where an alarm would go off in the city every once in a while just to test it. But this alarm would go off if we were at war. So they would always say, there's a chance that America's going to invade us. So, just playing in the neighborhood, me and my cousins were like, okay, we would hear the alarm, we're used to it, we would pause for a little bit, and we would just look around to see what the adults are doing.
Right.
No one runs off. So we're like, okay, it's just a test, right?
Yeah, that's a weird thing though. I probably used to talk about it differently, but now it comes up every year we do the lockdown drill, like school shooters coming in, whatever. And it's something you need to be concerned about, you should be aware of, and try to have a plan in place. But the likelihood of ever experiencing that, thankfully, is very low. And so, as much as it's to make sure there's a plan and to give confidence to students, to young people that there are things we're trying to do to make sure we're staying safe, it's also a reminder that you're in danger in ways that maybe you are, maybe you aren't. It's the old duck and cover turtle, we used to do during the Cold War when I did it a couple times at elementary school, and then just my age. But for decades, American schools did a bomb drill where everyone hid under their desks. You could have been living in the middle of Wyoming. No one is dropping a bomb there. There's no one there. It would be the biggest waste of a bomb. Yeah. But those schools still did. And so, it's a little bit of a plan to keep you safe. Also a little bit of propaganda to remind you that maybe someone wants to hurt you. Yeah. And so if you sort of become accustomed to, what was it called again? You said that.
It was like they called it the danger alarm.
The danger alarm.
And imagine us on our way back home from school. We used to walk from school.
Right.
And then we hear it, and there's no one, no teachers for us to ask, is this a test or not? We just sprint home just to kind of get.
Just in case.
And it was and we also used to watch, I remember as a kid, I would go to sleep sometimes, and on the TV, I'm watching the Gaza war. Okay. And what's happening in the children in Gaza. And I've been to areas on the borders of Golan, or in English they call it Golan, where the Israeli occupation took from Syria. And just kind of, you do live with that fear, and, just watching children here is different than children. As a child, I remember we'd be playing, and then we would just pause and start talking. And one of the questions sometimes we would ask each other, we're like, okay, if the war comes, who are you going to carry with you and run to the shelter? When you run to the shelter, what are you going to carry with you? Like, that's something we ask each other as kids.
Right, like, well, oh, yeah.
Yeah.